Hello, welcome to the Den of Discussion. I'm your host, as always, Douglas Robbins. Today we have a very special woman that I'm really privileged to have on the show, and her name is Heather Hutchison. She is the author of a memoir, Holding On by Letting Go, and she's also an award-winning singer-songwriter. Her recent album is If I Could, which I heard today is just brilliant. But what's also remarkable about Heather is she has done all of this in her life by being blind since birth. And what a privilege to have you on the show. Thank you, Heather. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Well, where do we begin? I don't even know. Um, I guess with blindness, since that's the thing that's been with you, obviously, since you were born, is it a legal blindness? How does blindness even be categorized? But can you see some, or can you not see at all? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, when they think of blindness, they think of all or nothing, which isn't really how it works. It
Yeah.
it exists on a spectrum. So for me personally, it actually really depends on the day, how tired I am, the lighting.
Hmm.
I have the doctors classify it as light perception, but I would say it's a little bit more than that. I can see, stark contrast between maybe like checkered floor tiles, like black and white floor tiles, or if somebody's like standing right next to me, I might be able to see that somebody's standing there, but I would never know who they are.
Hmm. So certain images and, like I said, certain days, is it why would certain days affect that differently? Or you mean by the
It's
sun or by light? Or
all of the above. If I'm tired, if I'm stressed, it really depends. I actually see a lot of people are like, oh, you must see best in bright light. No, not at all. In bright light, I'm pretty much completely blind. I actually see
hmm,
best like right at dusk, in that kind of 5 minutes before the sun goes down completely.
really?
Yeah, that's my time to be able to sort of see the world for whatever reason.
Is it that like some sort of, and pardon me, like the optic nerves can pick up better definition at that time, and the sun somehow blocks that? Or
I think what it is that for me, the condition I have, my rods and cones didn't form properly, and they are what controls light and things like that. So I'm
Mhm.
very light sensitive. So for whatever reason, when the light is lower is when everything, all the rods and cones and everything sort of works in the eye that doesn't normally, because the brain and the eye is not communicating properly.
Interesting, interesting. So you would prefer not being out in the bright sun, I would think then.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And but like it's weird because so even when I was a kid, we would, sort of explore that, and my parents would we would go look at like all these different sunglasses and stuff, because they thought, oh, like maybe if she wears sunglasses in the bright day, then it'll be the same as dusk. No, not at all. We've never been able to find anything to be able to replicate that.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you navigated childhood. Is it considered legally blind? What is the actual definition or the label?
Yeah, yeah, I think it would be legally blind or visually impaired. Honestly, like the definition changes
It
all the
changes.
time, it seems like. And, people are always coming up with these more PC ways to say it or whatever. And
Right.
honestly, like I can't even keep track of
Yeah.
it.
It's the same result, but different PC
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
So I mean, again, part of my ignorance. So did you go to a school for blind students, or how did it work with your formal education?
No, I was mainstreamed, which was awesome. There are still some schools for the blind. I think there's one in Canada and a couple in the US. Which is great if it works for people. Typically, you have to go live at the school, and my parents wanted to keep me at home. And there's also this certain, I don't know, like we call them Braille jails, schools for the blind. And they kind of exist in this bubble, so they're great because you get all your your class notes and everything's in Braille. And so that's all kind of perfect, but you're not really learning how to deal with the real world. So often people will come out of those schools with not great skills around, the rest of the world. So for me, I learned a lot of that kind of stuff. I struggled with having materials in Braille and having like a calculator. Basically having what I needed for education was really challenging. But the advantage was that I got to grow up in, at home and in an environment where, a more quote unquote typical environment, I guess. So it was easier to adjust after um, finishing school and moving on to post-secondary.
So you feel like it was important not to go to Braille jail,
Yes.
and to be in a more socialized environment as you would in the world as you get older and kind of move into adulthood.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think it teaches you that the world, so, I had to learn from a really young age how to advocate for myself and my needs, so that I would be able to get the same materials as my classmates did. And I think in a school for the blind, you're not necessarily learning that because you just get everything you need because everybody needs the same thing.
That's such a curious phrase you just said, advocating for yourself, because right, that's all of life for really everyone. And blind or not, a lot of, maybe a kid didn't get whatever from a parent, or whatever it might have been, neglected. And really that's what it all comes down to, is advocating for oneself, saying, hey, I'm here, this is what I need, this is who I am.
Yeah.
And almost saying, you will look at me, I am here.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a tough skill to learn. I mean, I feel like I'm still learning it.
Yes, I'm still learning that as well, frankly, and I'm 50.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's like a lifelong thing. I don't think you ever wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm so great at advocating for myself
Right.
now. It's tough.
Yeah. But what's curious is right, is giving ourselves that voice, saying, hey, I mean, because often we look to others to do whatever for us, when we're the ones who often need to say, hey, this is where I'm at and this is what I need,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
instead of being passive in it. So when did you start writing, books or music? Which came first?
That's tough. I don't really know which came first. I don't really know that there was ever a time that I didn't quote unquote write, because before I could write, I would always carry as soon as I could walk, I would carry this giant Fisher Price tape recorder around with me everywhere, like the ones with the microphones on the
Yeah.
side and everything that weigh a ton. And I would always be dictating stories into that or making up my own songs, things like that. I think I decided in grade 1 or 2 that I wanted to be an author, and I also wanted to be a singer. And I remember being like 6 years old and making a deal with my brother that he was going to loan me $100 to record an album, which obviously is not enough money to record an album.
But still, he was supportive, though, most importantly.
Well, I mean, I guess you could call it that. I think he was charging me like 30% interest, so it wasn't.
Make it a buck off you. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So were you, I mean, you're saying you want to be a singer, songwriter, author. Were your parents supportive of this, or were they trying to coddle you a bit and sort of protect you from the world?
My parents were pretty good. You see that a lot with parents of kids with disabilities, where they kind of try and put them in this bubble or wrap them in bubble wrap.
Yeah.
I was talking to my mom about it not that long ago, actually, and she was kind of laughing, and she was like, it wouldn't have worked for you. We couldn't have, even if we wanted to, because you would have done whatever you wanted to do anyway. So yeah, I think for me, I was just, I grew up around my brother and my cousins, spending time with them, my friends. I didn't spend a lot of time with other blind people. So I was like, no, I'm going to do everything that my brother and my cousins and my friends are doing. They're all sighted. I'm going to figure out a way to do it too. And I think, I think it definitely made my parents nervous at times. like I remember being, I don't know, 5 or 6. My mom was talking about this recently, and I decided I was going to jump off the high diving board. And apparently, like, she's on the ground kind of freaking out because I'm walking across this thing. And she's like, oh my God, what if she like falls off the side before she gets to the water or whatever? But I was like, no, I'm doing it. So
I get the sense that yes, the bubble, you would have clawed your way out no matter what.
apparently, that's what I've been told.
But again, pardon my ignorance, but so being blind, you really have to trust others though to lead
Yeah.
you into safe environments.
Yeah, that's true. And it's funny, like my partner and my best friend, I think everybody who spends enough time with me has stories about how they they have not done that. Like I remember my partner, we just started dating, and it was the first time I met one of his friends, and he forgot to tell me that there was a staircase.
Oh no.
So, but somehow I managed to land, like, I don't know, it was impressive. I don't know how I did it, but I landed like on my feet at the bottom of the staircase, and his poor friend was like horrified, and he was horrified. And I think my best friend has stories like that too. Apparently, we met up with some of her friends, and we were walking on the beach, and I tripped over a piece of, I don't know, driftwood or something. And apparently they've never let her live that down. But like I'm just so used to these things that I don't even really think about them. So it definitely happens.
It sounds like going down the stairs, you had like an Olympic landing, like that you nailed it or something.
I don't know, like I felt like a cat or something. It was impressive.
Hmm. I think, and I could again be totally off base, that when you are blind or have issues, with one of the senses, that it enhances the other senses. Is that something you've heard or experienced, or am I just making this up?
Yeah, it's sort of a thing. I think often when people ask me that, they're thinking like I have some supersonic hearing or something. It doesn't quite work that way. What they have found is that research in studies that the brains of blind people, particularly if they were born blind, they actually dedicate more space to processing the other senses. So it's not like the inputs, amazing. Like I might score I get good scores on a hearing test, but they're not like out of this world.
Mhm.
But I process it so much better. So if I tell a sighted person what I hear, often they'll be able to hear it or smell it or whatever. They just would never notice it on their own.
Yeah.
So it's more about the processing than the actual input.
Mhm. Have there been any real advances with improvement in eyesight or legally blindness? Have there been much improvement in years, or?
Um, they're always working on things. It's something I sort of follow loosely. I feel like I would drive myself crazy if I
Yeah,
followed it all the time.
yeah,
They have been able to do gene mapping now. So they actually know, like for me personally, they know what the gene was that caused this. And the hope is that at some point they will be able to, they're working on one gene. So my eye condition, there's, I don't know, something like 27 genes I think now that they've found that can cause it, and they've found decent treatment for one of those genes, and they're working on the others. So yeah, there definitely is advances. I think it's a lot slower than than people would hope, but
yeah.
there are things. But then that kind of begs the question of like, do you do it? Do you go for it, no matter the risks? Like at
Yeah.
this point, for that one gene, I think the cost for treatment is $800,000 US. And, it's not necessarily, you would think it would be a fairly straightforward operation, but my specialist says no, because it's so close to the brain that you need to be like really careful of infection and things like that. So there is risk, and there's the possibility that you pay $800,000 and it doesn't work. So
Yeah, that would be bad.
yeah, not the best. So it's
No.
not like if people are like, oh my God, are you crazy? Like, of course, as soon as it becomes available, you should be like the first person in line, but it's not that, black and white, pardon the
Yeah,
pun.
yeah. Here's another dopey question. Um, like with LASIK is the cornea, right? And you're talking about the cones and the rod. So LASIK wouldn't improve anything, I'm guessing.
No, no, not for me. And it's funny and it's sweet every time something comes out in the news that's like a treatment for any eye condition. All my friends and family start
Uh,
sending it to me and they're like, would this work for you? And I'm like, no, but
no, but I'll take the 800 grand though.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so let's move on to the memoir. So tell us about the memoir, why you wrote it, what was the impetus behind it?
So, Holding On by Letting Go is my story of my life as a blind person growing up in Canada and Latin America. And my struggle, the kind of this parallel theme of my struggles with my mental health from a really young age, which ultimately culminated in being hospitalized for psychiatric care during COVID-19. So the second half of the book kind of really gets into that and what it was like in the hospital. And I wrote it to because people are always asking me, what's it like to be blind? And it's like, well, that's a loaded question. What's it like to be sighted? And then also because I really wanted people. I know when I was hospitalized, my loved ones were looking for information that they couldn't find, and particularly around being hospitalized as somebody with a disability who needs additional, um, supports. Um, there's just not a lot of information out there. And there was one night I was lying awake in the hospital and the medevac helicopter came bringing a critical patient. And as soon as they got there, they called a code blue. And I was lying there thinking about this person's loved ones and being like, my God, they're having one of the scariest nights they'll ever know. And then I started thinking about my own loved ones and thinking, how can I feel so much compassion and empathy for this person's loved ones while knowing the decision I want to make is going to devastate my own loved ones. And then I started thinking about the patient themselves and thinking, what a crazy juxtaposition, because this person's in here fighting to live and I'm in here fighting to die. And one of us has a choice. And it was just this moment of clarity. And I was like, well, if I'm gonna work to get better and to keep going, then I need to change how I've been living. I can't go on like this. And one good thing that I can hopefully do to make a good to do something good with this terrible situation is to share my story in the hopes that it can help somebody else.
Mental health is something that's gotten a lot more attention of late, and it plagues all of us to whatever degree. I've certainly suffered from depression and at times suicidal thoughts. I've never acted on them. However, I think in the past, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I was probably the closest to taking action. I had always said if I'd had a gun, I probably would have used it at the time. What brought you to this dark, despairing place? I mean, you said it's during COVID, but what really brought you there? And is this something you've struggled with since you were young?
Yeah, I think we first kind of noticed the signs when I was probably about 7. There were some challenges going on at home in my personal life at that point, and I started getting really anxious about people leaving or changes to my schedule, things like that. So it was the anxiety that came first. I started getting sent home from school because I would be sick all the time from the anxiety. And at that time, I hope things are getting better for children and mental health. But at that point, the pediatrician was just basically like, well, she's an anxious kid, she'll grow out of it, which unfortunately is not how it went. And I think with most illnesses, the sooner you catch them and treat them, the better the outcome is going to be. But they just kind of let it go on. And then the anxiety just sort of morphed into depression, because who wants to feel like that all the time? So you start looking for a way out. So I've been struggling with major depressive episodes probably since I was 12 or 13. And I happened to be in one when the COVID-19 pandemic started. I was getting quite a bit of outpatient mental health support at that time because I'd had a scare a few months earlier. That all kind of stopped or was limited. They weren't seeing patients in person at that point. They were just doing phone appointments. It wasn't even video. So they didn't really see like the physical signs of my decline. And basically, I just wasn't far enough into recovery where I could support myself on my own through that time. So it basically became necessary for them to hospitalize me, because basically there was no other way to keep me alive.
It's amazing the heaviness that we can carry, and it's from the inside, right? I mean, we might create whatever about the outside, but it's that inside stuff that really, there might be whatever pressures from the outside, but it's that inside that really weighs heaviest on us.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm glad. So you're taking medication. You've cleared certain things in your mind, or how, what helped you to move forward?
Yeah, I think it's always a struggle. I think people have this idea sometimes that mental health is this destination, and I try not to think of it like that. I think it's a journey. If I think about it as a destination, I get more depressed because I feel like I'm failing, on the bad days. Um, so it's just, for me, it's taking, I know I'm probably going to struggle with this for the rest of my life. It's an illness. So what tools basically can I employ to minimize this and to manage it? And how can I get better at using these tools? So basically, being in the hospital, yes, they adjusted medications and things like that. And they gave me the tools, a lot of which I had already had, but it was kind of like this therapy boot camp almost, because you're doing like probably, up to 20 mini sessions with therapy sessions with your psych nurse every day. So you're constantly getting these tools reinforced. And then when you get out into the real world, you're kind of on your own to keep working at those tools. And I kind of compare it to, learning to play an instrument or play a sport or whatever. You're not going to sit down at the piano having never played before and expect to be a concert pianist. So I think it's just giving yourself the biggest thing that's helped me is giving myself a little bit of grace, knowing that not every day is going to be perfect. I'm not always going to get it right, but making that promise to myself every day that I'm going to try.
Yeah, I've found that, not kicking myself further down the rabbit hole helps.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that helps nothing, because then it's just this vicious circle of, well,
yeah,
I screwed that up. Well, of course I screwed that up. I'm worthless, and
yeah.
it doesn't help.
No, that negative self-talk just pushes us further and further down. So certainly the mindset changing, the thoughts, maybe even the environment or we're in can certainly help, but it's a battle.
Yes, yeah.
It's a battle for sure. Um, well, I'm glad you're doing better now. And yeah, I wonder too, is this just a lifelong sort of disease? Is it something, because it's a brain chemistry? I mean, it's the chronic fight or flight and cortisol and dropping in serotonin, and are there ways of balancing this better? And stress obviously adds to it. And um, have they given you certain, is that something they looked at as like sort of the brain function and the chemistry, or is it more of like, hey, you're suffering from anxiety, here's some Prozac or something?
Um, it was where I was. I mean, every hospital is probably going to be a bit different, or even every outpatient program. It was quite holistic. So yeah, they definitely did make use of medication, but they tried to get under at like the underlying
Yeah,
things, and really give tools, I guess. Not saying, okay, I'm going to cure you, this is what you need for the
yeah,
cure, but okay, this is how we manage this, because we don't know at this point if we can cure you.
yeah. But yeah, there's definitely often obviously underlying psychological factors.
Yeah.
Um, so you wrote the book Holding On by Letting Go, which is a beautiful title, very poetic. Um, and then you've also been an award-winning singer-songwriter. Like I said, I listened to your most recent album, If I Could, um, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, I was really into really into it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna play it for my wife. And so clearly you've been playing for a while, because it was a very well crafted, it seemed well edited and well produced. So tell me a bit about that journey.
Yeah, so I have 4 albums out at this point. My first album came out when I was 16, which is like interesting because most people would hate for people to know like what they were writing and working on when they were 16, because it's pretty embarrassing, but like
Yeah.
it's out there.
Yeah.
So, for better or for worse. But I was in a regional talent competition when I was 15. I had just started taking voice lessons because I'd started getting more serious about songwriting, and my vocal coach was like, "Oh, you really need to enter this competition." And I was like, "No way." Like, I was so shy and I struggled so much with stage fright and things like that. Um, but she convinced me, and in the finals of that competition, one of the judges on the panel was a producer, and he came up to me backstage and he was like, "I really loved the song you shared. We should talk about recording something." And I was super flattered and
Wow.
humbled that he would think that, but it was kind of like one of those things where I just figured it was something that somebody, like, one of those things people say. But 3 weeks later, we were in the recording studio, so it was really crazy to go from, like, the high school band room to the recording studio with all these
Yeah.
professional musicians and producers and engineers and all that in the space of 3 weeks. It was crazy.
Wow, that is crazy.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that was when you were 16 even,
Yes.
and your brother didn't make any money off of you.
No, he did. I never even got that $100 he promised me when I was
Ah,
6.
oh well, you didn't need him, I guess, for that. But
No, I guess not. I guess not.
so you were 16, a prodigy, if you will, putting out professional music, not just playing in the school talent show, or in at church or something like that. I mean, you're playing professionally. Where did that go from there?
So from there, yeah, I started playing more shows. I started playing in bars probably when I was 16. We used to have to get like special permission. I don't even know if you can do that
Yeah.
anymore, but but back then it was a thing. So that was kind of interesting, playing for like more adult audiences, I guess, or just like fairs, all that kind of thing. And then when I was 19, my second album came out. Then I took a break, went to school, um, lived in South America for a while, came back, wrote a third album about that sort of thing. Was playing a ton professionally before COVID. Had actually sort of COVID in a way was a blessing for me musically, because I was getting to a place with my mental health that I I wanted to quit playing on stage. It just wasn't bringing me any joy. I would stand up there and just go through the motions, and I remember thinking like, this isn't fair to me, and it's definitely not fair to the people who are coming to see me play. So getting that break, because like the forced break because of COVID, was actually kind of nice. And I was like, at that point I was like, no, I'm done with music. I'm never going to play music again. uh, Everyone's turned their back on me. Even music's turned its back on me when it's been the one thing that's always gotten me through. And then I went to the hospital. I took some time after that to write the book, and I still wasn't playing music. And then a producer who I had actually worked with on my first record, not the producer who was at the talent competition, this guy was actually a session player on my first album. We got back in touch, and turns out he had been struggling too with his own challenges. And he was like, "Oh, maybe we should get together and make some music." So I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure. Why not? Come out and we will play some covers or something." But I said, that's it. I don't write music anymore." Famous last words, of course. So he drives across Canada 26 hours each way and we recorded an album, and I obviously started writing songs again. So
Well, I'm glad you did, but why did you feel like you were done with music? I know you said the playing live wasn't working for you, but why did you feel like it was sort of drying up in your heart?
I think for me, I was in such a dark place that I was like, I don't even have anything to say anyways. I could barely get out of bed.
Yeah.
At the point where I was hospitalized, my hands shook so badly from over medication and starvation that I couldn't have played anyways if I'd wanted. So there were, I think, a lot of factors that went into it. But yeah, basically just, I mean, when you're in that dark place, the things that you love most in this world
You know.
just become another one of those things that don't even bring you joy anymore.
Yeah, it's amazing when you get into that place, there is no love.
No, no.
No love. Well, I'm glad that guy reached out to you and that you reconnected with a higher purpose, if you will, and music. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting. Like music is always, from that first time when I met my first producer, it's always kind of found a way to keep coming back into my life, even if I, try to dismiss it. It finds a way.
what's the old line? If you let it go, it
Yeah.
comes back to you.
Yeah,
If
something
you
like that.
Yeah, if you love something and you let it go, it comes back to you. So why South America? South America, not Latin America, I think. But
Yes.
why did you go
Um,
down there?
So I grew up as much as possible kind of surrounded by the Latin American community in Canada, and huge generalizations here, but in general, Canadians tend to have one of two responses to my blindness. Either they pretend that they're totally cool with it by cracking jokes, which is fine. I like a good blind joke as much as the next person, but none of them are funny. Like people think they're a lot more original than they are. So like
Hmm.
I feel like I've heard every blind joke there is like a million
Well,
times.
you're gonna have to tell me one or two now.
I like the whole like, oh, how many fingers am I holding up? Or like, everybody's been drinking. Oh, but you can be the DD. It's fine.
Uh,
So they either do that or they avoid it to the point where it's just like awkward because there's this elephant in the room. That they want to
yeah,
talk about, but they don't feel like they can.
yeah,
And people in Latin America, South America, for whatever reason, I've just found them always more open and accepting. They don't ask questions really, but they don't need to. They just sort of observe and intuit what I might need, or, things about me that they don't feel like they have to ask. It's like, I don't know, in North America, we almost have this, we feel like we have the right to knowledge, maybe, and we don't think that, maybe somebody talks about their disability all the time and just wants to like go to the grocery store in peace and not be like, have somebody come up and talk to them about it. So I wanted to go to South America to, I don't know, to be surrounded, to be fully immersed in that inclusion, and also to be different for a different reason, instead of being the blind girl, be the girl from Canada.
So you think we might be a little more presumptuous in North America?
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Did you find when you went there, were your truths upheld as far as how people responded to you?
Yes, absolutely. It was so refreshing, and it was so weird because the day that we came back, we were in the airport, and the very first conversation we had was with this man who asked my partner. He wouldn't even speak to me directly because that's a thing that happens all the time. I don't know, people think I can't speak English or something, but he asked my partner what's wrong with her. And nobody had said that to me or done that, anything like that, in the entire time that I'd been living in South America. So it was like, oh yeah, I've been back for 5 minutes and I am reminded of exactly why I wanted to
Yeah,
leave.
yeah. And then you turned around and hopped back on the next flight out.
I wish.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I think, for lack of a better term, unnecessary cruelty and insults when people are just sort of ignorant or opening their mouths without examining what their thoughts are.
Yeah, I think so. And I think in some ways the internet's making that even worse. Like I spend a lot of time these days on TikTok posting videos, and some of the comments I get are like incredible to me. Like how somebody can say that to somebody else. I don't
Like
get it.
something mean.
Yeah. Or even people accusing me of like faking it. Like, why would I
Yeah, I
fake
don't.
it? But what am I gonna get out of that?
I don't know.
I don't get it.
It's almost like, the internet has given, with the reviews and comments, and it's like people with an axe to grind. It's given them an outlet. It's given them power where they feel powerless otherwise. But yeah, ruthless things can be said, and just like it's like, is this who you are as a person? You go around belittling everyone and harming everyone and wanting them dead and everything else, and
Yeah.
it's a strange place because it's almost like you're not real.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they forget that there's a human being on the
Yeah.
other end of the keyboard. I always wonder, like, who are these people? Like, what do they sit down and talk to their family about at the dinner table? Like, oh, today I insulted
Right.
20 people on TikTok. Like, what?
Yeah. I had a great day, Mom. I insulted 50 people, told someone to jump off a cliff, and the other person to die. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly. It's bizarre. Who are these people? What kind of lives are they actually leading? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, obviously empty ones and trolling people.
Yeah.
It's like, do something, it's like, look, Heather is out there doing it. She's got skin in the game. She's putting herself out there. What are you doing to get skin in the game, to put yourself out there? Most people hide behind bravado or insults,
Yeah.
because they don't have the guts to do what you're doing or what other people are doing as far as creating something, beautiful for the world, and, being vulnerable.
Yeah. It's so true. They try to squash vulnerability, I guess, because they don't feel comfortable sharing it.
Yep. That's it. So Heather Hutchison, not Hutchinson.
Yes.
You can find Heather at Heather Heather dash Hutchinson Huthison.com. Is it the .com?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can find her where books can be found, on Amazon. Holding On by Letting Go. Her newest album is certainly worth checking out. It's called If I Could. Really beautiful stuff. It has been such an honor speaking with you today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been awesome.
This has been great. So I need more blind jokes now, but
It's funny. Now I can't think of any. Like I hear them all the time. And of course, like now I'm like, you put me on the spot. I'm like,
that's right. That's
I
right.
don't know. What's a good blind joke? Oh,
Well,
I
anyway,
know.
well, you'll come up with one later then.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you, Heather, and you have a great day, and I wish you all the success.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thanks.
having me.
Be well.
You too.